and a billionaire haunted by betrayal hires a black caregiver he already hates just because of her skin color. He watches her on secret cameras and, waiting for the moment she betrays him. Instead, he witnesses something impossible that forces him to confront the monster inside himself, and the mansion on the hill stood silent under the gray afternoon sky, its windows like cold, unblinking eyes. Inside, and Alexander Sinclair moved through the marble corridors like a ghost in his own life. At 42, he was one of the richest men in the city, owner of steel mills and tech startups and half the skyline downtown. But wealth had not bought him peace. It had only sharpened his suspicion. 3 years earlier, and a drunk driver had smashed into the family SUV on the coastal highway. His wife, Alana, died instantly. Her body curled protectively around their 6-year-old son Ethan, and the boy survived, barely. Shattered vertebrae, permanent spinal damage. The doctors delivered the verdict with clinical detachment. He will never walk again, and he may never speak above a whisper. Alexander heard the words, but something inside him refused to accept them. He poured millions into experimental treatments and stem cell trials, robotic exoskeletons. Nothing worked. Ethan remained locked in body that would not obey him, his once bright eyes now dull with resignation, and the betrayal started soon after. Caregivers came and went. The first stole Elena's diamond earrings, and the second left Ethan in soiled clothes for hours because the boy can't complain anyway. The third pocketed prescription painkillers and sold them on the street, and each time Alexander discovered the theft or neglect, he felt the wound reopen. Trust became a luxury he could no longer afford. So he installed the cameras and high-definition lenses hidden in smoke detectors, picture frames, bookshelf corners. Every room wired, every movement recorded. He told himself it was protection, and protection for Ethan. Protection for what little remained of his heart. But deep down he knew it was paranoia dressed as caution. And when the agency sent Aisha Jackson for an interview, Alexander's first instinct was to refuse. She was black, in her late 30s, quiet-spoken, and with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much sorrow. Her rade somme was thin home health aide, church volunteer, and single mother who had lost her own daughter to leukemia 5 years earlier. Alexander almost sent her away on the spot. Something about her skin color triggered an old and ugly reflex he had never fully examined. He had grown up hearing the quiet mutterings of his father's business partners and the casual stereotypes that money never quite erased. They only want what they can take. The voices whispered. He hired her anyway. 2-day trial. Cameras rolling, and he would catch her slip, just like the others. That Tuesday afternoon his boarding ended early. A merger fell through, the lawyers were still arguing, and Alexander drove home faster than usual, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The security app pinged on his phone as he pulled into the driveway. Routine motion alerts, and nothing unusual. Yet his pulse hammered anyway. He slipped into the small monitoring room off the library, locked the door, and opened the live feed from the East Wing playroom. Ethan's room. Ethan's custom wheelchair sat empty, its straps dangling like shed skin. His son, and the boy who had not borne weight on his legs in 3 years, was standing, not leaning. Not propped. Standing. Tiny bare feet flat on the Persian rug, and knees locked in trembling effort, small hands gripping the edge of the low bookshelf for balance. Ethan's face was flushed, sweat beading on his forehead, but his eyes burned with something Alexander had not seen since before the crash: determination. And 3 feet away, on her knees, was Aisha, arms outstretched, and tears carving clean tracks down her dark cheeks. She was singing soft, low, the kind of song that belongs to old churches and late-night prayers, and swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Her voice cracked on the high notes, but she kept going and rocking gently as though cradling an invisible child. Alexander's hand hovered over the panic button. Call security. Call the police. She must have drugged him and threatened him. Forced him somehow. There was no other explanation. But Ethan took a step, one shaky, impossible step, then another, toward her. And, Mama. The words slipped from Ethan's lips, clear, small, perfect. Not the slurred whisper the speech therapists had coaxed for months. A real word. And he wasn't looking at Aisha's face. His gaze went past her shoulder, upward, as though someone taller stood just behind her, smiling down. And Alexander's breath caught like broken glass in his throat. He watched, unable to move, as his son, his broken, silent son, walked straight into Aisha's waiting arms. and she caught him gently, sobbing now, pressing her cheek to his hair. "Good job, baby, good job." Alexander's vision blurred. The room tilted, and he stumbled back against the wall, the monitor's glow painting his face in cold blue light. He had come home to catch a thief. Instead, he had witnessed a miracle. And the woman he had already condemned in his mind, the black maid he had hired with nothing but doubt and old prejudice, was the one holding it in her arms. And the security room door clicked shut behind Alexander, sealing him in the blue glow of the monitors. His coat was still damp from the sudden rain outside, but he didn't notice. All he felt was the familiar knot of dread in his stomach, the same knot that tightened every time he reviewed footage after another caregiver left. And he expected to see Aisha pocketing silver picture frames, or worse, ignoring Ethan while scrolling on her phone. And he expected confirmation of every ugly assumption he had carried into the hiring decision. He tapped the East Wing feed. The playroom camera filled the largest screen, and at first the image made no sense. Ethan's wheelchair sat alone in the center of the room, and exactly where it always was when Aisha helped him transfer to the floor mat for stretching exercises. The padded backrest was still angled forward, and the chest strap unbuckled and hanging limp. The footplates were empty. Alexander leaned closer, frowning. Then he saw the small bare feet, and they were planted on the thick Persian rug, 10 feet from the wheelchair, Ethan's feet. Not propped, not braced by braces or a stander. Flat, bearing weight. And the boy's legs trembled violently from ankles to knees, the thin muscles twitching under pale skin that hadn't felt real pressure in 3 years. And his small hands clutched the low edge of the bookshelf, so hard his knuckles blanched white. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his chest rose and fell in shallow and rapid bursts. But he was upright, completely upright. Alexander's mouth went dry. He blinked hard, once, twice, as though the image might correct itself. It didn't, and 3 feet in front of Ethan, Aisha knelt on the rug. Her navy blue uniform was bunched at the knees. Both arms were outstretched, palms up, and fingers trembling almost as much as Ethan's legs. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks, and catching the afternoon light from the tall windows and falling in dark spots onto the carpet. She wasn't speaking. She was singing. Her voice was low, husky, and almost a whisper at first, but steady. "Swing low, sweet chariot coming, for to carry me home." And the old spiritual rolled out of her like something ancient and unbroken. She rocked gently forward and back on her knees, the motion matching the slow rhythm of the melody, and as though the song itself were coaxing Ethan's body forward. Alexander's hand hovered over the intercom button. His mind raced through possibilities, and steroids slipped into juice, some underground therapy she hadn't disclosed, hypnosis, coercion. Anything but this. Ethan shifted his weight. 1 foot lifted, an inch, and maybe less, then came down half a step ahead. The bookshelf creaked under the sudden redistribution of his grip. His face contorted with effort and something close to pain, but he didn't cry out. Instead, a small, astonished laugh escaped him, high and fragile. Another step. The trembling in his legs intensified, but he didn't fall, and Aisha's singing grew a fraction louder, the tears falling faster now. "Swing low, sweet chariot." Ethan's gaze wasn't on her face. It drifted upward, and past her shoulder, fixing on empty air about 5 feet behind her. His lips moved, "Mama." The word was soft, clear, perfectly formed, no slur, no hesitation. And the same word speech therapists had spent hundreds of hours trying to pull from him. Alexander's chair scraped back an inch, and his heart slammed so hard he felt it in his throat. Ethan took another step, then one more. Each one shorter, shakier than the last, but forward. Always forward. And toward Aisha. Toward the open space where he seemed to see someone waiting. Aisha's voice cracked on the next line, but she pushed through, and, "Comin', for to carry me home." She stretched her arms wider, as though ready to catch a falling star. Ethan's knees buckled slightly on the 6th step, and he caught himself, palm slapping the bookshelf harder. A tiny whimper escaped, but it turned into another breathless laugh. "Mama, Mama." He was close now, and barely 2 feet away. Aisha rocked forward onto her shins, tears splashing freely, her singing never stopping. One final, trembling step, and Ethan's legs gave out at the very end. He pitched forward. Aisha caught him instantly, arms wrapping around his small frame with practiced gentleness. And she pulled him against her chest, rocking him the way a mother rocks a newborn, sobbing openly now. Ethan buried his face in the crook of her neck, and tiny hands clutching the back of her tunic. "Good job, baby," she whispered between sobs. "Good job, you did it, thank you, Lord, thank you." And on the monitor, Alexander watched them sway together. Two figures bathed soft golden light from the window, and the empty wheelchair sat forgotten in the background like an old, discarded shell. He couldn't breathe properly. His vision swam, and something hot and unfamiliar burned behind his eyes, tears he hadn't shed since the funeral. He had come home expecting theft, and instead the impossible had happened in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and the woman he had hired with nothing but suspicion and old and unspoken prejudice was kneeling there, cradling his son, singing him back to life. The playroom seemed smaller now, and the high ceilings pressing down as though the air itself had thickened with something sacred and impossible. Ethan stood frozen mid-step, and one hand still braced against the bookshelf, the other reaching out into empty space. His legs quivered like new branches in a storm, thin, pale, unused, but they held, and for the first time in 3 years, they held. Aisha remained on her knees, arms wide, tears carving steady rivers down her cheeks. She had stopped rocking, and the spiritual hung unfinished between them, the last note of "Carry Me Home," dissolving into soft, shuddering breaths. She didn't dare speak louder, and didn't dare break whatever fragile thread connected this moment to whatever came next. Ethan's gaze lifted again, not to Aisha's face, past her shoulder, upward, and his small mouth opened, lips trembling not from fear but from wonder. The word floated out, clear as a bell struck once in silence. No slur, no halting effort, and just the single syllable, perfect and piercing. Alexander, still watching from the monitor's cold rectangle, felt the sound punch through his chest, and he pressed both palms flat against the desk to keep from falling forward. That voice, that exact tone. The way Ethan used to call for Alana when he woke from nightmares, and the way he had cried it in the hospital bed right after the crash until the painkillers dragged him under. Alexander hadn't heard it since. "Mama." Ethan said it again, and softer this time, almost a question. His eyes, wide, shining, stayed fixed on the space just behind Aisha's right shoulder. As though someone stood there. Someone taller, and someone familiar. Someone who smelled like vanilla candles and the lavender lotion she always wore. He took another step, and the bookshelf creaked under the sudden shift of weight. His free hand stretched farther, fingers splayed, reaching for nothing and everything at once, and Aisha's breath hitched. She saw where his eyes were locked. Fresh tears spilled, but she didn't wipe them away. Instead she whispered, and so quietly the microphone barely caught it. "She's here, baby. She's right here with us." Ethan's face lit with something brighter than pain, something like recognition, and a tiny, astonished smile broke across his lips. His knees buckled for a heartbeat, but he caught himself, palms slapping the rug once before pushing up again. Another step, and closer. "Mama, Mama." Each repetition grew steadier, more certain. The word became a heartbeat, a rhythm pulling him forward. Aisha opened her arms wider, and palms upturned like an offering. She was crying openly now, shoulders shaking, but her voice stayed gentle, steady. "Come on, sweetheart. She's smiling at you, and she's so proud. One more step, just one more." Ethan laughed, a small, breathless sound that cracked Alexander's heart clean in two. The boy's legs shook harder, and sweat dripping from his brow onto the rug, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Someone was calling him home. 2 feet away now. 1 foot, and his balance faltered on the final step. The trembling became violent, his ankles rolled inward. He pitched forward with a tiny gasp, and Aisha surged upward on her knees and caught him mid-fall, arms wrapping around his narrow frame like wings folding closed. She pulled him against her chest, and one hand cradling the back of his head, the other rubbing slow circles between his shoulder blades. "Good job, oh, good job, baby, you did it, thank you, and Jesus, thank you." Ethan buried his face in the soft curve of her neck. His small hands fisted the fabric of her tunic. He was shaking, exhaustion, relief, and miracle all at once, but he was still whispering, "Mama, Mama." Aisha rocked gently, tears soaking into his hair. "She's here," she murmured again and again, "and she never left. She's been waiting for you to stand up so she could hold you like this." On the monitor, and Alexander watched the two of them sway together in the golden slant of afternoon light. The empty wheelchair loomed in the background like a relic from another life, and he couldn't tear his eyes away from Ethan's face, flushed, alive, no longer vacant. from the way the boy's gaze kept drifting upward every few seconds, and, as though checking that the invisible presence was still there, still smiling, Alexander's own vision blurred until the screen swam, and he pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, but the tears came anyway, hot, silent, unstoppable. He hadn't cried like this since the funeral, and since he stood beside Elena's casket and felt the world fold in on itself. He had come home braced for betrayal, and, instead he was witnessing something he had long ago stopped believing in. A boy who could not walk was walking. A child who had lost his voice was calling for his mother, and the woman he had judged, condemned, before she ever crossed his threshold was the one cradling the miracle, singing it into being, and holding space for a love that refused to die. The spine-chilling truth settled over him like frost. Elena had never truly left, and she had simply found another pair of arms to finish what she started. The security room door banged open so hard it rebounded off the wall, and Alexander didn't feel the impact against his shoulder. He didn't feel the cold marble under his bare feet as he ran barefoot down the hallway, and socks left forgotten on the chair. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out everything except the echo of that single word, "Mama," repeating like a wound reopening, and he burst into the playroom. The scene hit him full force. Aisha knelt on the rug, Ethan cradled against her chest. The boy's small arms were wrapped around her neck, and face buried in the crook of her shoulder. His legs, those useless, atrophied legs, dangled limply now, but the rug beneath them still bore the faint imprints of footsteps, and 7, maybe 8. Small, uneven depressions in the pile where impossible wave had pressed down for the first time in years. Aisha looked up. Her eyes widened, and not in fear, but in quiet recognition. Tears still streamed down her face. She made no move to wipe them. Ethan stirred at the sound of the door, and lifting his head just enough to see his father. A tiny, exhausted smile flickered across his lips. "Daddy." The word was hoarse, barely more than breath, but it was there, real. Alexander's knees buckled. He dropped, not gracefully, not controlled. His legs simply gave out, and he hit the rug hard enough that the impact jolted through his shins, but he didn't care. He crawled the last few feet on hands and knees until he reached them, and reached his son, reached the woman holding the miracle he had spent 3 years and millions failing to create. He pulled Ethan into his arms first, and the boy felt impossibly light and impossibly solid at the same time. Alexander buried his face in Ethan's hair, and inhaling the familiar scent of baby shampoo mixed with sweat and something new, something alive. Tears came in hot, ragged waves. He couldn't stop them. Didn't try, and how? His voice cracked, shattered. How did this happen? Aisha stayed on her knees, hands folded in her lap now, giving them space but never looking away, and her uniform was damp at the shoulders from Ethan's tears and her own. She drew a slow, trembling breath. "Sir, I didn't do anything special." And Alexander lifted his head just enough to meet her eyes. His own were red-rimmed, swollen. "Don't lie to me. Not now. I'm not lying." Her voice was soft and steady despite the shake in her hands. "I was dusting the shelves, wiping the frames, the ones with your wife's picture. I started humming, then singing, and an old song my grandmother taught me when I was little. When things felt too heavy, swing low, sweet chariot." She paused, swallowing. Ethan was on the mat. Quiet, then like always. Then I heard him whisper. Not words at first, just a sound like he was trying to sing along. I turned around, he was looking past me. Up, and like someone was standing there. Alexander's grip tightened on Ethan. The boy's head rested against his father's chest, listening. He said, "Mama?" Aisha continued, and, clear as day. Then he put his hands on the bookshelf. Pulled. I thought, dropped the cloth, and knelt down. Started singing again, louder this time, and praying under my breath. "Lord, if this is you, if she's here, let him feel it. Let him stand." She looked down at her open palms, as though still seeing the moment, and he stood, on his own, no help, no push, just stood. Then he started walking step by step, toward me, calling for her the whole time. Alexander stared at her, and the words clawed at every rational part of him, the part that had spent years trusting only data, specialists, scans, money. "You're telling me my son, and who doctors said would never bear weight again, got up because you sang a song?" Aisha met his gaze without flinching. "I'm telling you he got up because something, and someone, gave him strength. I just opened the door with the song. The rest wasn't me." Ethan shifted in Alexander's arms, small fingers clutching his father's shirt. And she's nice, Daddy. She didn't push me. Mama did. The room went still. Alexander looked at his son, really looked. The boy's eyes were clear, calm. No confusion. No fear. And only a quiet certainty that belonged to children who still believed the veil between worlds was thin. Fresh tears burned Alexander's throat. He turned back to Aisha. And, I came in here to catch you. To prove you were like the others. Stealing, neglecting, using us. I watched you on camera every minute, and I judged you before you even walked through the door. Because of, he faltered, shame flooding his face. Because of how you look, and because I let old poison tell me who you were. Aisha's expression softened, no anger, no triumph, just sorrow and grace. I've heard worse, she said quietly, and seen worse. But I came here for him. She nodded toward Ethan. Not for money, not for anything else. When I lost my girl, the pain never left, and I saw his picture on the agency file. Same look in his eyes I saw in my baby's. I thought maybe I could help carry a little of it. That's all, and Alexander bowed his head. The weight of his prejudice, of every assumption, every hidden camera, every cold glance, crashed down on him. I'm sorry, he whispered, and the words felt foreign, inadequate. I'm so sorry. Aisha reached out slowly, hesitant, and placed one hand on Ethan's back, and the other resting lightly on Alexander's shoulder. Not claiming. Not demanding, just there. You don't have to be sorry anymore, she said. Just be grateful. He's walking, and he's talking. And her voice caught. She's still watching. Still loving. Through all of us. Ethan yawned against his father's chest, an exhaustion finally claiming him. Alexander held him closer, rocking gently, the way Elena used to. For the first time in 3 years, the playroom didn't feel like a tomb, and it felt like a beginning. The playroom air felt heavier now, thick with the aftermath of miracle and the raw edge of truth, and Ethan had drifted into an exhausted sleep in Alexander's arms, his small chest rising and falling in slow, even rhythm. Alexander hadn't moved. He stayed on his knees, and holding his son like something fragile that might vanish if he loosened his grip. Aisha remained kneeling a few feet away, hands resting lightly on her thighs, and eyes downcast, not out of submission, but out of respect for the moment unfolding between father and son. Silence stretched until it became almost unbearable, and Alexander cleared his throat, the sound rough and broken. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I need to say this before I lose the courage. And Aisha lifted her gaze slowly, no judgment in her eyes. Only quiet waiting. I judged you, he said. The second you walked into my office for the interview, and before you even opened your mouth. I looked at your skin, your color, and I decided who you were. I decided you were here for money, and that you'd take what you could and leave us worse off than before. Just like the others. He swallowed hard, shame burning his face. I told myself it was caution and experience, but it wasn't. It was prejudice, plain and ugly. I grew up hearing it whispered in boardrooms, at dinner tables, and in the places where money protects people from ever having to question their assumptions. And they only want what isn't theirs. They can't be trusted. I never said those words out loud, not in years, but I let them live inside me. And when I saw you, and they spoke first. Aisha didn't interrupt. She simply nodded once, small and understanding. I hired you anyway. Alexander continued, but I hired you with cameras rolling and my heart locked. I came home today expecting to catch you. To prove I was right. To fire you and feel justified. And instead, his voice cracked again. He looked down at Ethan's sleeping face, thumb brushing a damp curl from the boy's forehead. Instead, you gave me back my child, and you gave him legs. You gave him words. You gave him his mother back, even if just for a moment. Fresh tears slipped down Alexander's cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. And I'm ashamed. I'm so damn ashamed. Aisha drew a slow breath. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, measured, and carrying the weight of someone who had heard apologies before, and knew the difference between words and change. I've carried that look my whole life, and sir, she said quietly, the one that sizes you up and finds you wanting before you get a chance to prove different, in stores, on buses, in job interviews, and even in churches sometimes. It hurts, every time. But I learned early that people's blindness isn't my burden to fix, it's theirs. She paused, and fingers tracing an invisible pattern on the rug. When my daughter died leukemia, she was 9. After the funeral, after the casserole stopped coming, and after the world moved on, and left me standing in the wreckage. I felt that same blindness from people who should have known better, and friends who stopped calling because grief made them uncomfortable. Neighbors who crossed the street when they saw me coming. Even family who said, "And God needed another angel," like that was supposed to make the hole in my chest smaller. Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady, and I stopped expecting people to see me. I just started looking for the ones that help anyway. Because pain doesn't care about color. It doesn't ask permission, and it just arrives and stays until someone helps carry it. She looked at Ethan now, tenderness softening every line of her face, and when I saw his picture on the agency file, those eyes. Same emptiness I felt every morning waking up without her. I didn't come here thinking I'd fix him, and I came thinking maybe I could sit with him in the dark for a little while. Hold space. That's all I knew how to do. Alexander's shoulders shook once, and a silent sob. You did more than that. You opened a door I'd nailed shut. You let my wife back in through you. Through your voice. Through your heart. And Aisha gave a small, tearful smile. She was already here, sir. I just didn't block the way. He looked at her, really looked. Past the uniform, and past the skin that had triggered every old reflex. He saw the calluses on her hands, the quiet strength in her posture, and the sorrow that mirrored his own but had been carried longer, deeper, without the cushion of wealth. I was wrong about you, he said, voice thick. Completely wrong, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making that right. Not out of guilt, out of gratitude. Aisha inclined her head. Gratitude is enough. More than enough, and Ethan stirred then, murmuring something soft in his sleep. Alexander rocked him instinctively, the motion soothing them both. For the first time, the distance between them and the invisible wall built of suspicion and skin felt paper thin. Not yet, but crumbling. And in its place something new was rising, shared pain, shared wonder, and shared healing. Two people who had lost everything that mattered most now sitting on the same rug, holding the same miracle, and finally seeing each other not as colors or classes or threats, but as human beings who had both been broken and both been mended by grace they hadn't earned. And the prejudice that had once ruled Alexander's heart didn't vanish in a single breath. But in that moment, it began to crack, and light poured through the fissures, and the months slipped by like pages in a book no one had dared open for years. Spring turned to summer, then to the soft gold of early autumn, and in the mansion on the hill began to breathe again. Ethan's progress was slow at first, deliberate, almost reverent, and physical therapy sessions 3 times a week in the converted sunroom. Parallel bars gleaming under sunlight. Aisha there every day, and not as hired help but as constant presence. She walked beside him, one hand hovering near his elbow, never quite touching unless he reached for her. One more, and baby, she'd say, voice steady as gospel, Mama's watching. Show her how strong you are. He fell often. Legs buckled under the unfamiliar weight of hope, and each time he hit the mat, frustration flashed across his face, small fists clenched, tears threatening. But he never stayed down long. Aisha would kneel, and wipe his cheeks with the hem of her sleeve, and hum the opening bars of Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, until the melody pulled him back to his feet, and Alexander watched from the doorway most days, silent, arms crossed tight across his chest as though holding himself together. And the wheelchair remained in the corner of the playroom at first, folded chrome frame catching dust motes in the afternoon light. No one moved it. It felt wrong to hide it, and like erasing the journey. One evening Ethan wheeled himself over to it on his own, legs still weak but working. He touched the armrest, and traced the strap that once held him prisoner. Then he looked up at his father. It's okay now, Daddy. It helped me wait. Alexander knelt beside him, throat tight, and did. And we'll keep it, not as a cage, as proof. They moved it to the hallway near the front door, visible but no longer central. A quiet monument to grace, and the cameras came down next. Alexander did it himself one Saturday morning, while Ethan napped and Aisha prepared lunch in the kitchen. And he climbed the stepladder in the playroom, unscrewed the smoke detector lens first. Then the bookshelf corner, the picture frame mount, one by one, and the black eyes blinked out. He carried the small pile of hardware to the garage, dropped them into a metal trash bin, and poured concrete mix over the top. No ceremony, and just finality. When Aisha found him later, wiping dust from his hands, she didn't ask why. She simply handed him a glass of iced tea and said, "And, house feels lighter already." Suspicion didn't vanish overnight. Old habits die hard. But they faded. Alexander stopped glancing at doorways expecting betrayal, and he stopped checking locks twice. He started leaving his office door open when he worked late so Ethan's laughter could drift in. He started breathing easier, and Aisha became Auntie Aisha almost without announcement. It started with Ethan. One evening at dinner, real dinner now, not trays in separate rooms, and he reached across the table for her hand. "Auntie Aisha, can we make cookies tomorrow? The ones with the chocolate chips Mama liked." She smiled, eyes glistening. "And only if you help roll the dough, little man." Alexander didn't correct the title. He let it settle warm and right. The house filled with sound mornings, and Aisha's low humming as she braided Ethan's hair, while he sat on the kitchen stool, legs swinging. Afternoons laughter echoing down hallways as Ethan chased her in clumsy and triumphant circles around the living room, no longer needing walls for balance. Evenings the three of them on the wide leather couch, Ethan between them, and watching old family videos of Alina. When the boy pointed at the screen and said, "That's Mama smiling at us," neither adult corrected him. They just held him closer, and songs returned. Aisha taught Ethan the rest of her grandmother's spirituals. He learned the words haltingly, voice still soft but growing stronger, and Alexander listened from the next room, pretending to read reports, but really just letting the music wash over him. Sometimes he joined in, off-key, hesitant, and until Ethan giggled and pulled him onto the rug to dance. The once silent corridors now carried footsteps, small, uneven, then steadier, voices, and hugs that lasted longer than necessary. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla drifting from the kitchen on Sunday mornings, and laughter that started small and built until it filled every corner. Alexander changed too. He began introducing Aisha differently. At charity galas, "This is Aisha," and "Ethan's auntie and ours." At board meetings over video, a framed photo of the three of them on his desk, Ethan grinning between them. And when old business associates raised eyebrows at the black woman in family photos, he met their gaze without flinching. "She's family," he said simply. End of discussion. And one crisp October afternoon, Ethan ran, not walked, ran, across the lawn to where Alexander and Aisha sat on the porch swing. He launched himself into their laps, and, breathless, cheeks flushed. "I made it all the way to the oak tree without stopping." Aisha hugged him tight. "Told you. Grace don't rush, but it don't quit either," and Alexander wrapped both arms around them, the swing creaking under their combined weight. For the first time in years, the mansion didn't echo with absence, and it rang with life. The healing wasn't just in Ethan's legs. It was in the quiet moments, Alexander and Aisha sharing coffee at dawn, talking about loss without competition, and in Ethan's bedtime prayers, "Thank you for Auntie Aisha and for Mama still being here." In the way suspicion had been replaced by trust, prejudice by gratitude, and silence by song, the family had been shattered once. Now, piece by piece it was being remade, not back to what it was, but into something deeper, stronger, and stitched together by grace, forgiveness, and the kind of love that refuses to stay broken. The autumn sun slanted low across the lawn that October evening, and turning the grass gold and the oak tree's leaves into flickering fire. Alexander sat alone on the porch swing, the chains creaking softly with each slow push of his foot, and Ethan was inside with Aisha, Auntie Aisha now, practicing the new piano piece she'd taught him. The notes drifted out through the open window, halting at first, and then steadier, a simple melody that carried laughter between the keys. Alexander held a small framed photo in his hands. Elena, and smiling in the hospital garden the week before the crash, Ethan balanced on her hip, both of them squinting into sunlight. He traced her face with his thumb, and for years the picture had sat face down in a drawer. Today it rested open on his lap, no longer a wound but a quiet companion. He thought about the man he had been, and that man had believed money could fix anything. He'd bought the best doctors, the rarest treatments, the most advanced machines. When they failed, he bought distance, and cameras, security systems, locked doors between himself and the world. He'd believed suspicion was safety, prejudice was wisdom, and skin color told you everything you needed to know about a person's heart. That man had walked into every room expecting betrayal. And that man had almost missed the miracle standing right in front of him. The greatest miracle had never been Ethan's legs. The legs were astonishing, yes, and watching his son run across the lawn without assistance still stole Alexander's breath some mornings. The therapists called it unprecedented, and medical journals would probably one day carry Ethan's case as an outlier, a statistical anomaly. But Alexander knew better now. The legs were the visible sign, and the heart was the hidden one. His own heart had been paralyzed longer than Ethan's body ever was. Frozen by grief, hardened by loss, armored with distrust. And every caregiver who stole or neglected had only tightened the scar tissue. Every dollar spent without result had convinced him love was transactional, and faith a fairy tale for people who couldn't afford reality. Then Aisha arrived. A woman he had already sentenced in his mind, and a woman whose skin triggered every inherited reflex he'd never examined. He'd watched her like a hawk, waiting for the theft, the neglect, and the confirmation of every ugly story he'd absorbed without question. Instead she sang. She knelt. She held space for a grieving child, and in doing so, and held space for a grieving man who had forgotten how. She didn't preach. Didn't demand apology. Didn't wield the miracle like a weapon to shame him. She simply stayed, and sang the old songs. Prayed under her breath. Loved without conditions. And through her kindness, the kindness of the person he had distrusted most, and something cracked open inside Alexander that no specialist, no therapy, no fortune could have reached. Faith returned. Not the loud, declarative kind he'd mocked in others, and the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need proof because it has witnessed. He began to pray again, not for bargains, but for gratitude. He began to see people again, and not colors, not threats, but souls carrying their own invisible burdens. Loth returned too. Not the desperate, grasping love of a man trying to buy back what death stole, and the steady love that says, I was wrong, and I'm learning. He hugged Ethan longer. He listened to Aisha's stories of her daughter without competition. He laughed, and really laughed, at Ethan's clumsy attempts to braid Aisha's hair. The house no longer echoed with absence. It hummed with presence, and Alexander looked up as the screen door opened. Ethan bounded out first, legs pumping with the easy confidence of a boy who had forgotten what it felt like to be trapped, and Aisha followed, wiping flour from her hands, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. Daddy, we made snickerdoodles. Auntie says they're Mama's favorite. Alexander smiled, and slow, real. She'd fight us for the last one. Ethan climbed onto the swing between them. Aisha settled on the other side. For a long moment no one spoke, and just the creak of chains, the rustle of leaves, the soft exhale of three people who had walked through fire and come out holding hands, and Alexander reached across Ethan and took Aisha's hand. Her fingers were warm, calloused, steady. Thank you, he said. The words carried years behind them, and she squeezed back. We thank each other. That's how it works. Inside, the piano started again, Ethan's small fingers finding the notes. Outside, and the three of them sat in the fading light, connected not by blood or money or miracle cures, but by the simplest, strongest force, kindness that refused to see walls. And prejudice had blinded Alexander once. Kindness had opened his eyes. And in that opening, he discovered the truth no doctor could chart, no bank account could purchase. And love and faith can reach the places money and medicine never will. They reach the heart. They heal it. And once healed, the heart walks again, and even when the legs have already learned how.